We all hate the sound of the dental drill, but some people take avoiding it to an absolute pathological level. Forget basic fear. Today we are exposing 101 of the most ridiculous, pathetic, and flat-out unhinged excuses Americans have actually used to skip their dentist appointments. From gluing jaws shut to consulting pet psychics, this is a masterclass in medical stupidity. 1. Industrial superglue seemed like a brilliant way to fix a chipped tooth right up until the patient glued his jaw totally shut. He missed his emergency extraction because he physically could not open his mouth to complain to the receptionist. Talk about a sticky situation. 2. Mercury retrograde is amateur hour. One patient straight up canceled a desperately needed root canal because her pet psychic claimed the drill vibrations would permanently damage her golden retriever's aura. Yes, she chose agonizing tooth decay to protect a dog's spiritual energy. 3. Do it yourself. Dentistry is a massive trend right now. Instead of paying a copay, a teenager tried a viral video hack using pure household bleach and a magic eraser sponge. He skipped his actual checkup purely out of shame after burning away half his gum line. 4. Avoiding the clinic because your teeth look terrible is the ultimate American paradox. People will literally endure blinding pain and dodge appointments for years because they are too embarrassed to show their rotting smile to the exact person trained to fix it. 5. Inflation hits everyone hard, even mythical creatures. A dad refused to bring his kid in to get a severely rotting bicuspid pulled. He was closely monitoring the local tooth fairy economy and wanted to wait until the going rate for a molar hit $20. 6. Accidental manslaughter by garlic breath is apparently a real fear. Somebody called to bail on a deep cleaning appointment right after gorging at an all-you-can-eat Italian buffet. He claimed his breath was a lethal weapon and wanted to spare the hygienist. 7. Watching too many old cowboy movies gave someone a brilliant financial idea. He bailed on his scheduled extraction, grabbed half a bottle of cheap whiskey, and headed out to the garage with rusty pliers. Predictably, he ended up in the emergency room instead. 8. Waiting for nature to take its course was the literal excuse given when a pit bull swallowed a custom $1,000 night guard. The owner canceled her fitting because she was waiting a few days to retrieve the plastic mold from the backyard. Absolutely disgusting. 9. Bad vibes in the waiting room actually ruined a healing journey. A lady walked in, stared at a stack of 3-year-old gossip magazines on the table, and immediately walked out. She told the front desk the negative energy was simply too much to handle. 10. Mind control conspiracies are alive and well. A paranoid patient vanished from his clinic for an entire decade because he fully believed fluoride treatments were a government tracking system. He happily traded his sanity for raging gingivitis and breath that could melt pure steel. 11. Chugging a daily 12-pack of highly acidic citrus soda sounds like a nightmare for enamel. But one dude claimed this extreme diet naturally burned all his plaque away, completely eliminating his need for checkups. Dentists call it Mountain Dew mouth. He called it genius. 12. Office supplies belong on a desk, not in your mouth. A broke college student ghosted his orthodontist because he was trying to close a front tooth gap using tightly wound rubber bands from the mailroom. He basically strangled the blood supply right out of his gums. 13. The Monday immediately following the Super Bowl is a ghost town for dental clinics nationwide. Patients are so insanely hungover from cheap beer and spicy buffalo wings that the mere thought of a bright clinic light and a buzzing drill makes them want to violently hurl. 14. Playing the long game takes dedication. One incredibly lazy guy admitted he avoided all dental hygiene for 15 straight years. His master plan was to just let everything naturally rot right out of his skull so he could demand a shiny new set of fake teeth. 15. Sometimes clinic drama rivals reality television. A patient completely abandoned his ongoing bridge work because he found out his dental hygienist was currently dating his ex-wife. Honestly, having your bitter rival hold sharp metal hooks inside your mouth is a pretty valid reason to flee. 16. Choosing a limited edition fast food burger over oral health is peak Americana. A guy sat in a ridiculous drive-through line for 2 hours, completely missing his filling appointment. He told the receptionist the return of the McRib simply took absolute priority over a minor cavity. 17. Refusing to pay a $2 parking meter cost one stubborn patient a $100 cancellation fee. He literally drove circles around the downtown clinic block for 45 straight minutes out of pure spite, hoping a free spot would magically open up before his time ran out. 18. Nobody likes smooth jazz, but one millennial actually threw a fit over the clinic audio choices. She stormed out right before her cleaning because the lobby was playing an acoustic cover of a song that reminded her of a bad college breakup. Emotional damage clearly beats plaque. 19. Conspiracy theories take many wild forms inside a medical office. An incredibly paranoid guy refused to let the assistant use that little plastic suction tube during his exam. He was absolutely convinced the clinic was secretly harvesting his saliva to sell his DNA to cloning facilities. 20. You truly cannot pause an online multiplayer lobby. A teenager made his poor mother call the receptionist to cancel his wisdom teeth consultation because he was down to the final circle in a massive battle royale match. Securing the digital victory was clearly worth the physical agony. 21. Vanity frequently destroys basic logic. A bride-to-be totally skipped her final teeth whitening session because she had just gotten a ridiculously expensive spray tan. She was terrified that the protective paper bib strings would create permanent white smudge lines across her newly bronzed neck. 22. Weaponizing a cancellation fee is an elite level of toxic behavior. A woman purposefully no-showed her expensive cosmetic veneer appointment just because her cheating ex-boyfriend had prepaid the non-refundable deposit. She gladly sacrificed her dream smile just to watch him lose $3 grand. 23. Swallowing internet trends whole is always a terrible idea. A dude skipped his checkup claiming he discovered a genius natural whitening method. He was literally scraping his front teeth with crushed charcoal briquettes straight from his backyard barbecue grill, completely annihilating his protective enamel in the process. 24. Technology is supposed to make our lives incredibly convenient. But one tech bro missed his mandatory periodontal checkup because his incredibly expensive smart car decided to initiate a mandatory 2-hour software update in the driveway. He was literally locked out of his own vehicle. 25. Starting a debate at the front desk is always a massive mistake. A patient got into a wildly heated argument with the receptionist over whether a hot dog legally qualifies as a sandwich. He got so incredibly offended by her opposing culinary opinion that he immediately stormed out. 26. Fitness influencers constantly spread the most unhinged advice imaginable. A gym bro canceled his routine scraping because a podcast convinced him that aggressively chewing tough cuts of totally raw steak would naturally strengthen his jaw and magically clean his teeth without ever needing a professional touch. 27. Light drizzle is apparently a valid medical emergency in certain zip codes. A guy called from the parking lot, refusing to walk 30 feet because he was wearing brand new suede loafers. He chose a massive cancellation fee rather than risking a single raindrop on his luxury shoes. 28. Medical terminology can be deeply confusing for highly dramatic individuals. A woman threw a massive tantrum and canceled her procedure when she finally realized a dental crown was just a boring porcelain cap. She honestly thought she was getting a sparkly little tiara permanently attached to her molar. 29. Parental duties reach absurd heights during late October. A mom ghosted her root canal specialist because she needed an entire uninterrupted afternoon to meticulously inspect and sort her kid's massive pile of Halloween candy. She called it a critical safety audit, but the dentist called it ridiculous. 30. The distinct sterile smell of a modern medical facility was completely unacceptable for one highly sensitive individual. She aggressively canceled her urgent filling simply because the clinic's signature blend of sanitized alcohol and artificial bubblegum polish instantly triggered her deeply unresolved childhood trauma regarding mandatory elementary school field trips. 31. Superstition easily overrides common sense on a daily basis. One incredibly nervous guy physically drove away from the clinic after spotting a random black cat sitting near the entrance. He firmly believed that opening his mouth wide after that bad omen would invite evil spirits into his throat. 32. Household appliances should never double as surgical equipment. A very stubborn father canceled a pediatric extraction because he thought he could suck his son's loose tooth out with the hose attachment of a high-powered shop vacuum. He ultimately just traumatized the kid and broke the machine. 33. Main character syndrome is officially out of control. A lifestyle vlogger refused to sit down unless the medical staff signed extensive video release forms. When the doctor naturally declined to participate in her daily broadcast, she aggressively grabbed her ring light and completely vanished from the building. 34. County fairs bring out the absolute worst dietary priorities in adults. A guy pushed back his deep cleaning for 3 hours because he had just purchased a perfectly sculpted massive tower of blue cotton candy. He refused to let the hygienist ruin his sticky masterpiece with a toothbrush. 35. Anxiety triggers can be incredibly hyperspecific. A new patient laid back in the chair, stared straight up at the acoustic ceiling tiles, and immediately demanded to leave. She claimed the random dotted pattern on the plaster was deeply offensive and completely ruined her entire morning chakra balance. 36. Cosplay commitment frequently ruins basic healthcare. A guy permanently bonded plastic vampire fangs to his actual canines using heavy-duty construction adhesive right before Halloween. He skipped his November checkup because he was deeply ashamed of looking like a budget Dracula every single day of the year. 37. Timing cosmetic enhancements terribly is a massive amateur mistake. A local influencer got 2 massive syringes of lip filler an hour before her cavity filling. She had to violently bail on the dentist because her lips were literally too swollen to fit the tiny mouth mirror inside. 38. Spoiling reality television is an unforgivable offense. A highly vindictive woman walked out of the waiting room right before her root canal purely because the front desk clerk loudly discussed the season finale of a dating show she had not watched yet. Plaque simply cannot compete with petty drama. 39. Modern technology inspires the most ridiculously dangerous medical shortcuts. One stubborn father actually skipped his son's pediatric extraction to attempt pulling the loose tooth with a high-speed racing drone. He just ended up tangling the fishing line in a tree and terrifying the neighborhood squirrels. 40. Guilty consciences absolutely hate nitrous oxide. A married man aggressively canceled his surgical wisdom teeth removal at the very last second. He was genuinely terrified that the temporary laughing gas would accidentally make him confess his massive secret credit card debt to his overly suspicious wife sitting nearby. 41. Culinary masterpieces demand absolute respect. A self-proclaimed foodie pushed back his urgent cavity drilling by an entire week just to preserve the aftertaste of a highly expensive white truffle risotto. He aggressively refused to let cheap mint toothpaste ruin his heavily overpriced gourmet sensory experience. 42. Neighborhood politics somehow trumped a severely abscessed molar. A wildly aggressive homeowner association president completely ignored her emergency extraction just to attend a Tuesday morning meeting. She simply had to be there to scream at her neighbor over a slightly overgrown front lawn hedge. 43. Buying unauthorized medical devices online always ends in total disaster. A cheapskate ordered a sketchy home aligner kit and practically superglued the cheap plastic straight to his gums. He missed his professional consultation because he was trapped in his bathroom desperately trying to chisel his mouth open. 44. Bending the rules for pets goes way too far sometimes. A furious patient stomped right out of the clinic lobby because the staff politely refused entry to his giant emotional support iguana. He loudly declared that the reptile was absolutely essential for his personal dental anxiety management. 45. Protective gear is legally required, but some people hate looking bulky. A wildly shallow teenager refused to let the hygienist drape that heavy lead apron over her chest for routine X-rays. She skipped the exam entirely because the protective shield totally ruined her carefully planned outfit. 46. Listening to rogue fitness podcasts creates absolute havoc. A hardcore gym fanatic canceled his crown repair because he started a primal jaw workout routine. He was literally chewing on hardened pine resin and small rocks, totally convinced his modern teeth just needed a little aggressive caveman conditioning. 47. Judging professionals by their personal quirks is deeply unfair. One incredibly judgmental guy completely bailed on his brand new periodontist merely because the doctor spoke with a very slight lisp. He somehow equated a minor speech impediment with a total inability to operate a tiny metal scraper. 48. Luxury expectations have completely ruined basic medical visits. A wealthy suburban mom marched out of her scheduled teeth cleaning because the waiting room did not offer complimentary cucumber-infused sparkling water. She dramatically claimed the harsh tap water environment was violently hostile to her personal wellness journey. 49. Numerology makes people do the absolute dumbest things. A wildly superstitious dude drove all the way to a highly rated specialist but refused to exit his truck. He realized the street address digits added up to exactly 13 and drove home, preferring a cracked bicuspid over imaginary bad luck. 50. Bedazzling your own smile is a guaranteed trip to the emergency room. A high school student missed her cleaning because she tried attaching a cheap rhinestone to her front tooth using heavy acrylic from a nail salon. The chemical reaction permanently bonded her upper lip directly to her gum line. 51. Thrift store shopping occasionally creates completely absurd scheduling conflicts. A wildly pretentious young man totally bailed on his morning checkup purely because he had just scored a vintage, heavily starched denim jacket. He absolutely refused to lean back in the examination chair, genuinely fearing the movement would crease the stiff historical fabric. 52. Spiritual retreats completely clash with oral hygiene requirements. A woman undergoing a strict 3-day vow of absolute silence for her local yoga studio totally ghosted her dentist. She literally could not open her mouth for the exam without technically breaking her deeply pretentious meditative physical seal. 53. Radiation paranoia takes many totally ridiculous shapes. An elderly patient brought a literal homemade aluminum foil helmet into the examination room and absolutely refused to remove it for the panoramic jaw scan. He marched right out the door when the doctor explained how heavy metals block the machine. 54. Taking tools from the garage workbench into the bathroom is always a massive error. A guy canceled his appointment because he attempted to buff out a tiny chipped tooth using a handheld rotary power drill. He absolutely obliterated his enamel and practically hit the sensitive nerve center instantly. 55. Porch pirates will literally steal your medical priorities. A deeply obsessed homeowner completely missed a pricey cosmetic consultation because he was glued to his live doorbell camera feed. He spent 3 straight hours intensely watching a neighbor retrieve an empty cardboard box from the rain-soaked front porch. 56. Social media echo chambers spread the most dangerous scientific theories. A wildly misinformed teenager skipped her fillings because a viral video convinced her that cavities were actually natural biological storage compartments. She genuinely believed her rotting molar was just rapidly evolving to hold extra emergency food supplies. 57. Petty revenge often strikes in the parking lot. A dude aggressively canceled his appointment from his cell phone purely because he saw the head dentist stepping out of a rival sports team bumper-stickered car. He happily chose a severe toothache over funding a totally unacceptable football fandom. 58. Extreme thriftiness leads to incredibly disgusting bodily tracking. A patient accidentally swallowed his temporary gold crown while eating a hard pretzel. He called to proudly postpone his permanent fitting for 3 whole days while he meticulously monitored his bathroom visits to manually retrieve his own recycled dental investment. 59. Overcompensating for terrible daily habits occasionally results in spectacular physical failure. One incredibly anxious patient vigorously brushed his teeth 14 separate times in a single morning just to hide a year of sheer neglect. He had to abruptly cancel his cleaning because his severely abused gums were actively bleeding all over the bathroom sink. 60. Losing your temper in public is incredibly embarrassing. A grown man stormed out of a crowded waiting room directly before his name was called. He literally got into a wildly heated shouting match with a toddler over a wooden puzzle piece and fled the building out of pure blistering shame. 61. Matching with your dedicated dental hygienist on a dating app is a uniquely modern, absolute nightmare. After aggressively ghosting her incredibly boring opening message, one cowardly patient completely abandoned his scheduled periodontal deep cleaning just to avoid 30 solid minutes of intense, weaponized, heavily judged eye contact. 62. Observing the staff parking lot can drastically alter your financial perspective. Driving away furiously, a deeply petty man skipped his root canal purely because he spotted the head surgeon getting out of a brand new luxury sports car. He absolutely refused to personally fund another expensive leather interior upgrade. 63. Jawline aesthetics have totally poisoned teenage brains. Refusing to literally open his mouth for a mandatory X-ray, a high schooler bailed on his orthodontist because breaking his strict 24-hour mewing streak would instantly destroy his artificially sculpted, highly viral, totally ridiculous facial profile. 64. Arguing violently with artificial intelligence is the absolute peak of modern American stupidity. After receiving a standard automated appointment reminder, a hyper-defensive guy took the robotic tone completely personally, texted back 12 furious paragraphs of pure insults, and proudly boycotted the entire clinic forever. 65. Elaborate facial hair requires intense daily maintenance and absolutely zero medical interference. Guarding his gigantic, perfectly curled handlebar mustache with his life, a local hipster canceled his cavity filling because the tiny suction tube threatened to completely dissolve his incredibly expensive artisan styling wax. 66. Vinyl examination chairs are notoriously unforgiving to specific clothing choices. Sweaty and deeply insecure, a new patient stood up and marched out of the room before the exam even started, because his swishy windbreaker pants created a humiliating, highly suspicious squeak every single time he took a deep breath. 67. Lobby entertainment is a very serious business for demanding adults. Demanding a full refund for a service he never actually received, a wildly entitled man walked out solely because the waiting room aquarium lacked exotic saltwater fish. He claimed staring at boring neon tetras was a massive insult to his intellect. 68. Faking a terrible toothache to skip a useless corporate meeting is a classic office maneuver. But when his overly helpful boss actually prepaid for an emergency clinic visit, the liar simply drove past the building and went bowling, perfectly willing to let his untreated imaginary cavity eventually destroy his mouth. 69. Scrolling through social media in the waiting room is incredibly dangerous. Stalking his new doctor online, a furious father discovered the dentist had named his golden retriever the exact same name as the patient's human son. Deeply offended by this perceived massive disrespect, he grabbed his coat and immediately fled. 70. Drafting a reliable kicker should never take priority over severe gum disease. Sitting completely frozen in his car, a massive sports fanatic entirely missed his surgical consultation because his fantasy football league clock was rapidly ticking down and the clinic waiting room desperately lacked a reliable wireless connection. 71. Corporate boycotts frequently extend right into the medical examination chair. Glaring directly at the complimentary hygiene goodie bag, a highly political activist canceled her routine polishing because she fundamentally disagreed with the environmental policies of the specific mint toothpaste brand sitting on the little metal tray. 72. Extreme couponing creates a deeply warped and heavily distorted sense of everyday reality. Slamming his hand hard on the reception desk, a completely unhinged bargain hunter abandoned his extraction because the staff politely refused to honor a buy one, get one free taco voucher as a valid form of premium healthcare currency. 73. Hydration trends have officially crossed the line into pure biological sabotage. Participating in an extremely dangerous dry fasting internet challenge, a wellness influencer refused to let the doctor spray even a single drop of water into her mouth. She dramatically canceled the cleaning to protect her totally dehydrated aesthetic. 74. Basic clinical instructions can apparently trigger massive ego meltdowns. Refusing to use that tiny little chairside sink, a sharply dressed executive abruptly ended his consultation. He loudly declared that leaning over to spit out flavored pumice was an incredibly degrading physical act totally beneath his corporate pay grade. 75. Accidental protein consumption totally derailed a perfectly good morning. Riding his bicycle to the clinic, a guy swallowed a massive rogue June bug mid-yawn. He turned completely around and went back home, entirely convinced his oral cavity was now permanently biologically compromised and totally beyond professional saving. 76. Performance anxiety hits the hardest when you simply need to clear your throat. Paralyzed by the terrifying thought of the assistant watching his Adam's apple move, a highly neurotic patient faked a sudden and aggressive coughing fit, sprinted directly down the hallway, and completely bailed on his desperately needed crown placement. 77. Hyperfixation is a brutally powerful force against adult medical responsibility. Sitting at his dining room table in dirty pajamas, a grown man ignored 5 separate confirmation calls. He completely blew off his root canal because he was only 3 border pieces away from finishing a spectacularly boring puzzle of a baked potato. 78. Maintaining a digital high score occasionally requires profound and absolute medical stupidity. Addicted to a highly questionable daily habit tracking application, a deeply competitive teenager refused to visit his hygienist. He was proudly protecting a totally unhinged 60-day streak of actively avoiding all modern toothpaste products. 79. Excessive bodily modifications heavily complicate standard X-rays. Sporting 14 heavily rusted metal rings vertically pierced entirely through his tongue, a rebellious bass guitarist skipped his exam entirely. He was physically exhausted by the heavy judgmental sighs he always naturally received from highly educated medical professionals. 80. Bureaucracy makes overly dramatic people completely lose their tiny minds. Handing over an incredibly expired driver's license, a fiercely independent sovereign citizen absolutely flipped out when politely asked to update his basic paperwork. He chose to passionately scream about constitutional travel rights instead of getting his painful cavity drilled. 81. Virtual reality addiction is creating massive real-world health crises. Strapped tightly into a heavy digital headset, an absolute gaming fanatic simply refused to physically enter the clinic. He aggressively told the receptionist his digital avatar already had perfect teeth, meaning his actual rotting molars were completely irrelevant. 82. Local anesthesia consistently triggers the absolute weirdest control issues in grown adults. A highly suspicious corporate lawyer completely refused a desperately needed root canal. He was genuinely terrified that while half his face was totally numb, the dental assistant would successfully hypnotize him into signing over the legal deeds to his multiple rental properties. 83. Morning radio contests possess a bizarre level of power over daily commutes. Sitting idly in the clinic parking lot, a determined listener missed his entire extraction window. He absolutely refused to leave his vehicle until he successfully called in to win tickets to a deeply washed-up 90s rock band. 84. Crystals are completely useless against severe bacterial infections. A local bohemian skipped her desperately needed root canal to focus entirely on holistic healing vibrations. She spent 3 agonizing days aggressively rubbing a raw amethyst against her swollen cheek before finally admitting defeat and driving straight to the emergency room. 85. Temporary cosmetic fixes demand extreme situational caution. Terrified of a tiny splash of water, a highly insecure middle-aged man canceled his teeth cleaning at the very last second. He had just applied a ridiculously dark spray on hairline product and firmly chose vanity over curing his massive gum disease. 86. Holding a grudge against civil servants is a wild reason to ignore agonizing tooth pain. One deeply petty individual skipped his urgent consultation simply because the clinic was located next to a specific crosswalk. He stubbornly refused to ever make eye contact with the local crossing guard who yelled at him a decade ago. 87. Wearable fitness technology completely dominates the modern American mindset. A highly neurotic marathon runner stared at her smartwatch in the clinic lobby and immediately left. She realized that sitting perfectly still in an examination chair for a whole hour would absolutely destroy her daily step count and ruin her digital leaderboard ranking. 88. Some people treat modern medicine exactly like a Black Friday electronics blowout. A wildly misguided father aggressively postponed his kids' cavity fillings for 8 straight months. He was absolutely convinced that if he just waited long enough, the dental office would eventually offer a massive holiday discount on porcelain crowns. 89. Competitive eating requires a level of intense, totally uninterrupted physical dedication. An aspiring hot dog champion purposefully skipped a mandatory surgical consultation just to protect his carefully stretched stomach. He aggressively claimed that swallowing even a tiny drop of numbing gel would completely ruin his highly scientific gastric expansion training schedule. 90. Interior design choices often trigger deeply dramatic emotional responses. Taking one quick look at the freshly painted examination room walls, a highly sensitive artist abruptly canceled her procedure. She claimed the aggressive shade of mustard yellow deeply offended her personal color palette and violently disrupted her healing aura. 91. Convenience culture is officially completely out of control. An incredibly lazy driver called the front desk from the street and furiously demanded a drive-through cleaning service. When told he actually had to walk inside the building like a normal human being, he cursed out the receptionist and peeled away in total disgust. 92. Ancestral memories are apparently stored directly inside your jawbone. A wildly eccentric patient actively refused to let a surgeon remove his deeply impacted wisdom teeth. He aggressively argued that extracting those useless bones would permanently erase his mystical connection to his ancient cave-dwelling forefathers. 93. Wi-Fi passwords can apparently be interpreted as a direct personal attack. A hypersensitive teenager aggressively packed up his backpack and completely ghosted his orthodontist appointment. He read the totally standard guest network password on the wall and genuinely thought the randomly generated letters were secretly insulting him. 94. Bad feng shui totally ruins basic medical logic. A woman actually sat down in the motorized chair, pulled out a digital compass on her phone, and instantly leaped back up. She completely abandoned her cavity filling because facing slightly northwest during a medical procedure would supposedly invite total financial ruin upon her family. 95. Mental projection is a terrible substitute for professional tools. A deeply arrogant wellness coach skipped his yearly X-rays to practice highly advanced manifestation techniques. He sat alone in his living room for hours, intensely staring at a mirror, purely convinced his brainwaves could magically regenerate a massive chip in his front tooth. 96. Shared names constantly create totally unhinged political boycotts. A furious local voter completely canceled his expensive bridge work purely because his newly assigned dentist shared a first name with an incredibly unpopular local mayor. He happily chose a horrific toothache over indirectly supporting a perceived political enemy. 97. Auditioning for reality television requires insane personal sacrifices. A desperate guy took a bizarre vow of absolute silence to prepare for a completely ridiculous social experiment game show. He completely missed his urgent extraction because verbally confirming his birth date at the front desk would instantly destroy his method acting process. 98. Catfishing requires absolute visual consistency at all times. A deeply deceptive single man completely avoided fixing his heavily chipped front tooth for 3 straight years. He had aggressively photoshopped that exact identical dental flaw into all of his online dating profiles to somehow magically prove those highly edited luxury vacation pictures were actually real. 99. Protective instincts go way overboard when expensive accessories are involved. A terrified woman straight up refused to take off her massive designer sunglasses during a routine cleaning. When the doctor politely asked her to remove the giant frames so he could actually see her face, she grabbed her purse and vanished into the parking lot forever. 100. Petty arguments with a spouse will easily derail essential bodily maintenance. A wildly stubborn husband drove all the way to the clinic door before aggressively throwing his car into reverse. He skipped his deeply needed root canal strictly because his wife had reminded him to go, and he absolutely refused to ever give her the satisfaction of being right. 101. Pure, unfiltered American stubbornness is the ultimate health hazard. One legendarily defiant guy completely stopped going to his clinic for 30 straight years without any valid reason at all. He simply woke up one random Tuesday morning, decided that nobody tells him what to do with his own mouth, and violently embraced a lifetime of absolute dental anarchy. Alright, be honest. Which of these absolute clowns made you the maddest? Was it the guy who glued his jaw shut, or the lady who chose her dog's aura over a root canal? Expose your own worst or dumbest excuse in the comments. Right now, I know you have one. And if you actually brush your teeth twice a day, hit that like button and subscribe before your enamel completely rots away.